welcome to another episode of Unauthorized and Explicit Readings. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Thanks for joining me today as I take a look at a particular passage, mostly for shits and giggles, and then comment on some very interesting language in and around a particular passage from the New Testament. As always, the music notes are on my profile for each show. All the music used on any of my podcasts is available at freemusicarchive.org. A great selection of music that, with different licenses for use in different ways, worthy of being looked at. All right. So, today we are going to look at a particular passage that I've been sort of looking at and contemplating and trying to let inspiration come on what to comment on. I found some interesting things that I knew were there. I'd read them before. I've read the Bible several times, but I obviously didn't have it on the surface of the mind. This was all triggered by the fact that someone in some comment thread somewhere threw out John 4:20 on some social media. Don't remember where. This is from at least a week ago. I've been sitting on this for about a week already. And I've been, just kind of trying to develop it in my head, and it's been slow going. But here we are nonetheless. Reading from the King James Version of the Bible, first book of John, chapter 4, verse 20. If a man say, I love God, and he hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? First, I want to admit that my curiosity was engaged because obviously 420 sticks out as a number. And there is some interesting sidebar. I'll probably do another episode of it sometime. There is an interesting sort of conspicuous bits of evidence that indicate that cannabis and other plants may have been really important to either the ancient Jews or other, tribes of people in the era, during the eras that the Bible describes or is attributed to describing. Let us remember, I'm not here to Bible thump like a blind faith Bible thumper. I'm not a participant in any Christian church. And let us remember that the Bible was itself written many hundreds of years after the fact in all cases. The New Testament was not written down by any of the 12 apostles. It was written down by other people. Many, like the earliest that things historically are noted to have possibly been written down is like between 60 and 80 years after he died. That's the earliest. So imagine that if someone were to write your biography, but they're going to wait 60 years, which is almost an entire lifetime, or 3 generations worth of people growing up and getting jaded and not remembering you, before they wrote your bibliography or your biography. Okay? And I'm not here to argue the sanctity or the specialness or the authority or genuineness or corruption level of the Bible. I'm here to assure you that the best of my research that I've done, there is a horrible grab bag mix of bullshit and truth in the books found in the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament, and that there's a logical way of trying to determine which one's which. And I'm going to read to you some of the things I found in this particular chapter as example. But let's stay focused here on the meat of John 4:20. By the way, out of curiosity, I also Googled Luke 4:20, Mark 4:20, and Matthew 4:20. I don't think I'll get into them today, but the tabs are open. I don't think any of them have any direct reference to cannabis, which is, of course, would be extra ridiculously cool if it were so. But it's not, apparently. But there are some interesting things here found in this chapter beyond that, which they talk about. And the very statement itself should not be underestimated. So let us continue with just the fact of it. What does it mean? What is it trying to say? Why do I have an opinion on it? And what can we unpack from this statement? Why do I have an opinion on it? Well, to give you the breakdown as quick as possible, I've rambled about it in previous episodes, but I was a serious Catholic that took the Bible very literally for a period, and then also very figuratively, but spiritually speaking, for a period, and tried to be a true believer in the Catholic Church. So I went through my, late elementary, junior high, and high school phases of my youth in deep study of the Bible and constant reading of it. I read it like someone rereads and rereads Hitchhiker's Guide or the Harry Potter books. And I'll tell you what, to this day, I haven't encountered anybody that has a better argument about what can and cannot be said about the Bible. The idea that it is the absolute Word of God, complete nonsense. And that is, in fact, symptomatic and emblematic of the very hijacking that I talk about intertwined in all my podcast series. And I'll lay it out for you right now, for those of you who don't know, who are tuning in for the very first time, perhaps. I'm not reading from the Bible because I belong to any Christian sect or church or denomination. I'm reading from the Bible because I think it is a container that has been fucked with. And it was supposed to contain these gems of ancient mystic wisdom, and it has been fucked with over the 2,500 years, or 2 and some chump change thousand years since we nailed Jesus to a cross, in order to control people. Religion is currently, while it has many wonderful, fuzzy, lovey-dovey examples of goodness that it can be possible of doing or capable of doing, all religions are currently mind control devices and are hijacked by the corporate war profiteers, and have been since before the King James version of the Bible was published by King James of England. And that, while that is not my own thesis originally, it is integrated and woven in, that statement, into my big meta-thesis about what's really going on in the universe. But I digress. If a man say, and there should be quotes here instead of just a parentheses, but they had different grammar back in the day. If a man saith, or say, as I've seen both, I love God, comma, and hateth his brother, comma, he is a liar, colon. Let's stop there. If a man say, comma, I love God, comma, and hateth his brother, comma, he is a liar. Why would this be in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, as part of the unpacking of Christ's teachings? Well, I'm sure that plenty of standard, old school, taught by other Christians have pontificated about this. Pardon the term. That's very Catholic of me, pontificated. Mostly only nerdy Catholics will get that. But let me give you the postmodern mystic understanding of what this is. So set aside whatever you've heard in whatever Catholic church or Christian church of whatever flavor or variety. And let me give you the, what is sort of at the center of my brand. Let me give you what I think might be a postmodern mystic interpretation. Before we open up to the rest of the chapter. He, man, is a liar if he can say these two opposites. If he can say, I love God, but be willing to kill someone else, which is equivalent to hating your own brother. Right? Because what is invoked by brother? What brother in the Bible first hateth his own brother? Oh dear, biblical scholars. Ding, 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 ding. Anybody who raised their hand and shouted out Cain and Abel gets gold stars. Or green leafy stickers, whichever one you like better. So, Cain and Abel. What do we know about Cain and Abel? Well, Cain kills Abel. Why? We're not sure, are we? Am I going to go dig it up for you now so I can spoon feed it to you? No. I'm going to say if you like books and if you like mysteries, go and dig up your Bible and read Genesis and Cain and Abel. That's a whole nother episode, folks, which I will be preparing down the pike. Why am I punting this to you? Because I want interested, avid listeners who've done a little bit of their own reading on Cain and Abel before we even get to it. Because I got a whole thing to unpack on what my thoughts on what Cain and Abel are, or is. What it means, what that story means, why it's in the Bible. But let's just sort of, to borrow from Christianity, let's look at it from our perspective now. This is why I say it's postmodern. Let's say, forget it's the Bible, forget Christianity never existed. Today, God opens up his microphone inside everyone's ear and says that sentence. How would we come to terms with it now in our postmodern context of all this crazy that we live under? This oppression, this endless warfare, this culture of greed and shallowness, and this culture of acquisition and power and subservience and inequality and racism and hate and xenophobia and genocide. How do we understand this? Because we see a lot of people saying they love God. Sorry, this tends to backfire. I can postulate theoretically that let's set aside all Christianity, pretend it never happened. But then we have to invoke it too, because what does Christianity do? Talk about loving God a lot. Our very own leader of the first world, the Drumpf Meister himself, waves the flag occasionally, not very consistently does he do this, but he claims to be a Bible-loving Christian who loves the Bible better than any other book in the world, except maybe his own, art of the deal, which it has been shown he had very little to do with in writing. Some following it around for a while and then wrote it for him, and that he didn't ever really sit at a computer and type. They all say that they love God. No offense, I support the human individuals with unconditional love myself. I'm not trying to be judgy or hatey at them, because it would be a hypocrisy, and I would be myself the kind of liar that God is warning us of. To judge and hate my brothers who fail to pass this test is to be itself a failure of myself, this avatar self, a failure of that test. But what does it mean? What does God mean? How can... Well, isn't it obvious? There are people out there who are praying to God as they load their bullets into their guns and, once more into the breach, my friends, go to war. History is littered with it. We make heroes and idols out of religious warfare icons. I mean, what else? How else can you fairly describe, the Knights of, the Knights Templar, or what's her name? The lady who had, was crazy, the French lady that, God told to go fight these battles and save France. She's a national hero because she rescued France from oppression, sure. But she also sort of sociopathically waged war in a way that was unnecessary and brutal and violent. And in the name of God. God says, if you hateth your brother, which every person is, no matter what country they come from, they are your brother. That's a genetic truth. And wouldn't God know the genetic truth? Didn't God itself personally oversee the design of the human genome, which is 99.9% identical in all human individuals? If you hate your brother, literally, figuratively, violently, to the point of death, and your brother is anyone. For does not God himself say somewhere in the Bible, look unto the least of your brethren, and you shall see me, right? I propose to you, my dear listeners, that this is at the very heart of all of our problems, of our societal ills. Because God is not, as I've said before, some externalized, personified character that resides in some special place from which you have been isolated from. God is rather that which is all things. Right? Because for the man that does not love his brother, to kind of put this into English instead of Shakespearean, for the man that does not love his brother, who he can see and be with, how can he love God whom he is yet to see, who he has not been with yet? Whoa! Didn't I just say God wouldn't be divided from us? Isn't the lie is that God is divided from us? Yes, the lie is that God is divided from us. And John was writing things. John 4:20 was writing things, and God may have been channeling through that particular author the message that God is everywhere. Let's see. Let's open up. Let's see if I'm crazy or if there's some concurrence here. Viewing full chapter. Boom. Now, what I'm going to say to you, my friends, is that this chapter is going to be a very cleverly mixed bit of bullshit and ancient mystic truth, which was carried forth through endless generations and endless varieties of oral tradition down to the time when it was written. And after the time it was written, it has since then been edited over and over and over again. Thus we have this mix, this strange, disproportionate mix of man's egotism encroaching on the ancient wisdom that was being transmitted, and gems that somehow managed to survive the mutilation of the text, and they're still there to be rediscovered and engaged with at a spiritual and energetic way. And that I think I've explained in other episodes of different shows, segments, and that I will at some point explain again here in this show segment, or this segment show, however you want to look at it, the ways in which you can, for yourself, verify the truthiness or the truthality of my claim here, or the measurement that I'm trying to provide for you. But for now, let's look at actual examples and discuss. Let's not pre-decide, right? John 4, King James Version. Beloved. It opens with beloved, addressing you, the reader. Beloved, one which I love. Believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. True. Is that not always true? Was that not true in Christ's living time? Did not Christ speak at synagogues and argue against the Pharisees and the way in which they were interpreting their ancient sacred script and text? I believe that is true, and that is something that is often lost or obfuscated. Jesus was a rebel in his own time. I know that there's a strong movement that's out to prove that Jesus didn't exist. I say to you that it's a mix of both. There was a guy. His name probably was not Jesus Christ, because that's not how names worked back in the day. Christos is a label and an archetype that transcends and existed before and beyond most of the postmodern brands of quote-unquote Christianity as they are known today. So that's really important to understand if we're going to go beyond studying the garbage in, garbage out regurgitation. No offense, my friends who belong to churches, but that's what it is. If you're in a church and you're studying under the guidance of a church that has a brand name and a label and and a budget and a $1 million stadium, then you're getting garbage in, garbage out conditioning, because all of the branded religions have been hijacked for the purpose of preventing you from realizing the truth that is captured within the books. Why? Because those that oppress us don't want us to realize the shit that God would really say to a writer if and when he could inspire someone to speak such message to others because of the dilemma and the problems that they face in their time. Mm-hmm. Why would the system want us not to be able to comprehend that? Because comprehending that message would then render their oppression of us moot and dead, game over. An enlightened people cannot be oppressed. Therefore, we are not enlightened, right? Because we are oppressed. And while some individuals, like Christos, the man we call Jesus Christ, may have been approaching an enlightenment to the point of beginning to embody and live out the enlightenedness and to speak from a divine inspired place, the state has what does the state do? Marginalize, kick out of the country, and or assassinate. But I digress. There are, as we know, today in contemporary times, as there was in Christ's time, and in the time of the beginning of his church, which is really what the Gospels are. The Gospels are not so much Jesus' teachings directly preserved by those who learned them from Jesus. They are historians of a later date trying to piece together that which they can sort out from oral tradition and some, letters that were shared by the founders of the church after they sort of, quote-unquote, founded Christ's church after he was killed. Okay? Many false prophets at the time. You can look around right now and see many false prophets, both under the Christian brand and under the non-Christian spirituality brand. People just taking your money to almost teach you the truth. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God. That's a confusing sentence, and I bet that the sort of newer adaptations of this is even more ambiguous or more pointedly misleading. But let's get through some of this, Shakespearean language. And every spirit that confesseth, this is John 3, that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh, is not of God. And this is that the spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it would come, and even now is already in the world. Wait, so right nowadays, most Christians who aren't academic students of their own text would say that we are to be on the vigilance for the coming of the Antichrist in the future, because they will bring about the Armageddon, right? But here it's talking about the Antichrist, which is spirit, not a person in body flesh, is already in the world. All right, let's not get caught up in it just yet. We'll unpack it all. I might have to go 2 episodes on this. I haven't done that in a while. I'm supposed to do shorter episodes. I'm already 20 minutes left. Verse 4, ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Who is in you? Well, a Christian would dutifully say Christ. And then we think about the guy that we murdered. But the guy that we murdered has a completely interesting, different thing to say. Remember, the guy that we murdered, the guy that we strung up on a cross, nailed up to a cross, literally, said, what you do unto the least of your brothers and sisters, your brethren, other human beings, you do to me. You should look into each other's eyes and see my eyes. He also said somewhere in Mark, I believe, and these are all things that I love so much. I can recite them by rote, but I didn't bother to memorize their bookmarky, their chapter and verse. Forgive me. I'm a horrible Bible thumper, but I'm not a Bible thumper, right? Jesus also said about sight. Remember in the beginning at John 4:20 that we're going to hopefully get to in at least 2 episodes of this. He talks about his brother that which he has seen. What does Jesus say about sight? He says something really interesting. What does he say about sight? I've already quoted 2 things that he says about sight. Here's a third one that he says about sight. Thine body be an eye. If thine eye be singular, thy body be made of light. All right, but I'm not done yet. I'm trying to expound on some stuff. Because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. That reminds me of Jung. He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. But that's a stretch, right? Okay, moving on. 5. They are of the world, therefore speak they of the world, and the world heareth them. We are of God. He that knoweth God heareth us. He that is not of God heareth not us. Hereby know we the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. These are different spirits. Or energy. What was spirit? What was spirit as it is defined now by most churches as kind of like a Holy Ghost, an image of some aspect of the Holy Trinity. But of course there's all kinds of controversial debate about that. And Christians fight amongst Christians about interpretation. But let me tell you what the ancient mystics said spirit was. Energy. Duh. Because they understood that everything was energy. Okay. Beloved, let us love one another. And here we're going to get to some hardcore shit that even Christians forget really hard, really easy, really fast. As you can see when Christians get angry and start protesting things out of hatred. This is John 7. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is God. Love is of God. And every one that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. 8. He that loveth not knoweth not God. For God is love. I hate to break it to you folks, but every religion has that in there. And yet here we are in a crazy, fucked up world where Muslims are killing, Buddhists are killing, Jews are killing, Palestinians are killing, everybody's killing, Hindus are killing, everybody's killing. But in everyone's religion, somewhere, everywhere around, God is love, love is God. To know God, you must love each other. Not just each other like your mom and your dad and your brothers and sisters and your boyfriend and your girlfriend and your babies, but everyone. Because he who hateth his brother and says that he loves God is a liar. And guess what? You and whoever, pick anybody on the other side of the planet, are brothers and sisters. 9. In this was manifested, mind you, the Bible uses the terms of manifestation, manifested. In this was manifested the love of God towards us, because that God sent his only begotten Son into the world, that we might live through him. Now, this is where they get you on the guilt thing. And I propose that structures like these can be vetted out to be misleading at best. The way Politico or PolitiFact or one of those supposedly... I hope I haven't run out of time yet. Oh, no, I still got 15 minutes. Good. One of these organizations might say that they have, they are unbiased and nonpartisan, and that they are just verifying the factualness of a statement of a politician running for office. Well, I propose to you that we need to do that with the Bible in a really new way, in a really dramatic way. Coexist, all the religions are different cultural, ideogrammic, ideologic, attempts to capture the divine message. The divine message originates from no culture. The divine message originates from source. What does the Bible have to say about source? The bit about his only begotten Son. Now, there's a lot of ways to interpret that, and I would argue that any of the ones that are trying to hook you into guilt, feeling bad, and and then connecting to original sin, those are being misused and are themselves misinterpretations or misconstruences. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. That's the true. No man hath seen God at any time. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. Now, isn't it interesting how many preachers and false prophets claim to speak to, have heard from, or seen God? But in the Bible, it says no man has seen God. But when we love each other, God dwells within us. What does that remind you of? The golden rule. Where does the golden rule come from? Everyone's religion from around the world has an expression of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would like to have done unto you. Love others as you would have loved yourself. Hereby know we that we dwell in him and he in us, because he hath given us of his Spirit. All right. What's a postmodern interpretation of that? God manifests this body. God puppeteers this body, and in us is active, the most powerful, and dwells, as in resides, as in occupies, as in utilizes or motivates us if we love one another. And we've seen and do testify that the Father sent the Son to be the Savior of the world. Now, that one gets into like ego trap realm, in my opinion, in my analysis, in my many years of reviewing this kind of language in all the books. Because the moment you make one person more special than any other person, you then elicit or sort of implicitly require the denial of the unity amongst us all in divinity. Why would Jesus say, I am in you and in your brothers and sisters, if he's also special and separate and alone and separate from us? That doesn't make sense, right? Well, I believe that, throughout the many times that it's been edited and revised, there's been an attempt to sort of inculcate this distraction away from the self-liberating actualization of God dwelling in us, as opposed to up there on a throne made of gold in heaven that is behind gates that we have to pass a test to get into. Although, ironically, I do talk about how this is a test, but it's not about going over there somewhere as a special reward. The test is purely in of itself like the acceptance of all that has happened. Whosoever shall confess that Jesus is the Son of God, God dwelleth in him and he in God. And if Jesus is the Son of God, maybe it does not mean uniquely special and lordly above us, all human beings. Maybe it means, as I think Christ's own words tries to indicate to us, a manifestation of our highest potentiality in allowing God to dwell within us as body avatars. Herein, or within, is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Because as he is, so are we in this world. Now, the day of judgment and all that gets really abused and brutal. It becomes a fear-mongering tactic. I propose to you, my friends, that that's part of all of this corruption that I'm addressing or discussing. Of course, that one statement alone doesn't go very far to prove it, but a pattern that gets connected throughout eventually does. And that's that words like judgment in their original context indicated something else other than God's going to punish you. And then they were slowly reduced and sort of transmuted into that over generation of changing. Just the way, for example, today our very president insists that and is fabricating from falsity to truthhood the statement that Russia is just a ruse and a made-up accusation that is completely unreal. Whatever he means, it's becoming believed because he keeps repeating it. And we have known and believed the love that God hath to us. Now, see, it's important to note that in ye olde ancient times, before this was written, when Jesus was walking around talking and speaking, believe and to believe someone and to say I've believed was a lot closer in meaning to beloved, with which this this word used earlier in this chapter. I think the chapter opens with it. Beloved and believed meant much more similar things having to do with the expression of love. Now today we are told that we need to believe. That means accept the ideological construct of and imbue it with our belief, trust, or energy or power. Because as he is, so are we in this world. That's complicated, but I think that it connects to things that indicate that we can all achieve manifesting the Christos, the grace of Christos, as whoever his name was did. When he stood up and said, hey, yo, folks, I think we got to kick out the moneylenders and the borrowers because all that false debt slavery is bullshit, because that's not what the universe is about. I got 7 minutes left. Let me get to the really interesting part. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. How do most preachers of any religion today approach their audiences? With fear-mongering. Something that right here, in this particular book of this particular religion, it is spoken and it is described as something that God and that love would never use. Because God is love. Why would God ever use fear? So I'm not crazy when I tell you that yes, fear-mongering and war-mongering are all over the Bible, but that is evidence of mankind's self-corruption. We're an ego-addicted species. 19, we love him because he first loved us. There's the little bit of that, trying to make it so that God is better than us. But it comes back, though. If a man say, I love God, here's John 4, verse 20. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother, whom he hath seen, how can he love God, whom he hath not seen? And this commandment we have from him, that he who loveth God, love his brother also. In other words, any person that truly does love God doesn't speak or pledge or claim to love God or announce or make special statements about it. He just is busy loving his brother, his brethren, his beloved, his family. And given the postmodern understanding that we, the human species, are all one family, and each of us no more different than any one from you and your cousins, and that the previous notion of race was engineered by white, rich, powerful, supposedly Christian men in order to subjugate, subdue, and enslave people of darker skin colors, pigments, just because they weren't living quite as a crazy and neurotic and, quote-unquote modern life as they themselves were, the rich and white powerful Christians. This kind of thing is all over the Bible. God is love. It's all over the sources for Sufism. Rumi says it in his own way. God is love. Buddhism addresses it in its own terms. Every religion strives towards some explanation of this. It is not some crazy, insane, new age, postmodern, hippy-dippy, crazy thing. It's arguably the truth. There. Now, if that is so, then why does God let horrible things happen, and why does God let wars happen? In terms of letting them happen, it is because God is not our overlord. God is not our caregiver. God is not our slave master. God is not our emperor. God is not... Those are all fallacies, corruptions, ideological intrusions into the attempt to capture these ancient wisdoms into organized, words and to share them in the future. God is the love between you and those whom you choose to love. And as soon as you get on that tip, on that bandwagon, on that wavelength, you realize that there is no end or boundary or label or limit to love itself. It is a boundless frequency. It is source. John 4:20 helped us understand that right now, here and today, even in the King James Version. And I'm sure that in Worsley, where I could make a whole episode comparing King James to some really, really new and very, very Christian Bible, and show you the evidence that just in the 100 years from King James, not 100 years, sorry, several hundred years since King James printed that edition of the Bible, there's been a lot of mucking about with the words. But the gems are still achievable, and they're still there. One of the reasons I love King James is that I have a theory that not only is it true that there's another theory that says King James asked Shakespeare to edit and manage the project of producing and compiling and editing and making the King James version of the Bible the most beautiful to read, because at that time Shakespeare was one of the most revered wordsmiths, living wordsmiths. And I think that's true, and I think that Shakespeare was, in his own way, some form of prototypical, sort of closet spiritualist. Because many things that he went out of his way to make sure remained strong and vivid in the King James Version of the Bible, the strongest of which is love. And the very Rumi-esque, the way Rumi himself in his era addressed the relationship between man and God as love letters or love poems between a man and a future wife, like a fiance. I think Shakespeare did the same in many ways in his sonnets in Psalms, etc. And there's all the not enough time. Got to run, folks. Thanks for listening. I will be back talking about some of those other passages. I hope you enjoyed this crazy plunge into the Bible. Brace yourselves. We're going to go into other books in future episodes of all kinds, of various ilks. And like I've said before, if you've got suggestions, throw them at me. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you. And remember, we are here to forgive and empower and heal each other, not fight over which religion is the most righteous. So abandon all the religions, folks, and get busy loving. Peace.